Hi, welcome to a joint venture and co-show, coming to you live the first Wednesday of each month. Thanks for joining and or watching our replay.
We're going to be talking about the intersection of cannabis and wellness so that you and your family can feel better now.
This show offers educational resources and stigma-free support for people, including veterans and their families, as we take you on a deeper dive into a specific topic around plant medicine and wellness.
We're a community who listen and learn from others' wellness journey, including veterans and their families who are looking for alternatives not yet available through the VA healthcare system.
And I'm Ann Brum, and I help brands and social initiatives achieve their highest impact and increase their bottom line as a founder and CEO of Joint Venture & Co., a New England-based growth development agency with about 15 years in wellness, cannabis, and brand development.
I'm Steve Mandile. I served 8 years in the Massachusetts Army National Guard and deployed to Iraq. I continue to serve my communities in Massachusetts as an elected official, a spokesperson for the SM4 campaign, a consultant in the cannabis industry, and as an advocate with members of Congress for equitable access for wellness for veterans.
And you are tuning into a Joint Venture & Co. show here on Pro Cannabis Media. Let's get into it.
Good evening, everyone. How are you tonight? Thank you for joining us from wherever you're at tonight to hear our show.
Before we get into it, we'd like you to consider liking, sharing, or commenting anywhere you're watching or listening from and or on the replay. Thanks for joining us.
So we're going to get right into it. Tonight, we will be speaking with Dr. Peter Grinspoon. Dr. Grinspoon is authors of Free Refills, A Doctor Confronts His Addiction. He currently practices primary care at an inner city clinic in Boston and is on staff at Massachusetts General Hospital. You can go to petergrinspoon.com to schedule your medical cannabis certification. Dr. Grinspoon is also a certified health and wellness coach, offering coaching issues including addiction, recovery, weight loss, writing, maintaining a healthy work-life balance, and more. Thank you for joining us tonight, Dr. Grinspoon.
Thanks for having me.
Sweet. And we'd like to welcome our guest, Miss Patricia A. Patton, also known as the Canna Boomer. She is the founder of the Cannabis Business Alliance, a new business whose mission is to optimize and strengthen equity and healthy aging. You can also say she's a multi-hyphenate cannabis market consultant transforming how cannabis and hemp wellness brands market to baby boomers via her writing and content creation. Her business focuses on patient advocacy and education, engagement of broader audiences, and decoding jargon to allow consumers to make evidence-based decisions. And she hosts and produces the Me and Mary Jane podcast, and you can find that anywhere that you catch your podcasts. And you can also go to patriciapatton.com to subscribe to her newsletters. And for small Canna Curious pop-ups and for content creation and curation. And she also helps us at Joint Venture Co. So thank you very much for being Thank you for being with us this evening, Miss Patricia.
Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. So I've got the first question for Dr. Grinspoon. Many veterans do not discuss with their VA primary care physician or register as a patient in their state's medical cannabis program due to concerns including losing benefits from the VA, employment concerns, and many different privacy concerns. For those that want to try and see if cannabis is for them as a first timer and decide to purchase from an adult use cannabis dispensary or grow their own, could you give what you would see as the top 3 tips or recommendations to those veterans looking to get into cannabis?
Absolutely. It's really unfortunate that the Veterans Administration is so brain dead about medical cannabis. I mean, it's just so much safer than many of the medications that their doctors routinely prescribe, especially for insomnia and for chronic pain. And hopefully we'll make progress on this, because there's just no reason for it. Our veterans deserve better. They've served our country, and the least we could do is provide them the best and the most up-to-date medical treatment, which includes unfettered access to medical cannabis. And so I don't blame them for not discussing it or going through the VA system if they're just going to have negative repercussions. So they need to ideally they'll find a physician that it can help them, get on board with medical cannabis. But the most important things are to start low and to go slow, because most of the mischief that you get into with cannabis is dose related. People get very enthusiastic about trying it, and then you go into the dispensaries and the products look so alluring, but you don't want to go and drink a soda with 100 milligrams or eat a brownie with 50 milligrams. You want to just take a very, very, very small dose. And then the next day, take a slightly higher dose and just work your way up very slowly. I caution my patients that if you're going to make a mistake with the dose, make the mistake that you didn't take enough and try again the next day. Because if you take too much, nobody has ever overdosed and died from medical cannabis, but it could be a very uncomfortable sensation. It can make you very anxious, and people can have just an awful experience. So you just want to start low and go slow. And then a lot of it's just trial and error. You need to figure out if you want to inhale it with smoking or vaping, or if you want to try a tincture, which is under the tongue, or if you want to try an edible. And they all have their advantages and disadvantages, which I'm happy to go into, but that would take a little bit longer. So you want to figure out what form you want to take the cannabis in, and you want to start low and go slow. And then you really want to write down what works and what doesn't work, because again, a lot of it is really trial and error. And depending on what you're using it for, you want to talk to people, talk to friends that have used it, and try to find a healthcare provider that can guide you as well. Because the problem with cannabis is that there's so much information out there, and a lot of it's nonsense and a lot of it's really good information, but it's sort of hard to tell what's what if you don't really have a lot of experience with it. So try to find credible sources, give some thought into how you want to consume it, whether you want to smoke it, use a tincture, use an edible, or topicals are quite effective if you have musculoskeletal pain. And then the most important thing is just take your time, start slowly, don't be in a huge rush, because again, you'll get there. You just don't want to rush it, because you don't want to overdo it, because that could be very uncomfortable.
Right. And I'll add there too, if you are trying edibles, do not fall into the trap of, I don't feel anything yet, so I'm going to eat some more.
Right. That's why I said try the next day to take more. Edibles can take, when you smoke or vape, you get immediate gratification in the sense that you feel it right away. So it's a lot easier to titrate the dose. You could take another puff if you need more, but it only lasts for a couple hours. So if you have chronic pain, you have to redose every couple hours. Now, an edible can last all day and give you relief all day. But as you mentioned, it could take an hour or two to kick in. So it's harder to get up, figure out what the right dose is, because you take a dose and then the next day you have to try something else. And there's a beginner's mistake that a lot of people have succumbed to, which is you take one and then nothing happens in 45 minutes. And you're like, oh, this isn't working. I didn't take enough. So you take 3 more. And then you end up like way too high, and it could be very anxious. Another thing people do all the time is they make cookies or brownies and they eat the batter. And they end up like way too high too. So you have to be careful. The batter is delicious. But, I know so many people that have done that, including yours truly. So you have to be very careful with the batter as well. But again, if you're just very patient, you'll get there. And then cannabis doesn't work for everybody, but it's quite effective for many to most people that use it. And you can maximize your chances of having a really successful experience if you just take your time and go slowly and don't rush it.
I'd like to just come in and ask, just piggyback on that, for in your experience, Dr. Grinspoon, with veterans, specifically this patient population or public population, have you seen, if any, of a approach that they've taken to establish their relationship with cannabis? Like, is it the destigmatization or this understanding of what was purported by the VA and other medications that they might be on, a certain condition that they're looking to find relief from, different than, say, their civilian counterparts?
Well, veterans have a lot of anxiety from their experiences and also from dealing with the VA. I mean, to be quite honest, and a lot of anger as well because of how the whole cannabis issue has been dealt with is really just awful. I mean, until recently, the doctors weren't even allowed to mention it. I have friends that are doctors at the VA and they're really angry too. Everybody's angry about it. It's so ridiculous. But veterans suffer from chronic pain, both as all of us, we're getting older and more rotund and arthritic, but also from injuries. So chronic pain is a common issue, but I would say that PTSD and anxiety are the issues that we confront the most. And that's a really good reason to start low and go slow, because the one thing about cannabis is it's what's called biphasic, meaning that in low doses, it can really lower and help your anxiety. And in higher doses, it can make your anxiety worse, at least until you're accustomed to it and you find out what the right dose is for you. So in particular for veterans who are suffering from something like PTSD, it's crucial that they do start low and go slow until they get to a dose if they're comfortable. Now, it's different, again, if they've had experience with cannabis or not. If they, in college had smoked a lot and then they're comfortable, you can ramp up a lot more quickly. And if they've never used it before, you have to be a lot more judicious and just more careful. But I would absolutely say that PTSD is just a huge issue, PTSD and chronic pain.
And if they've experimented with plant material overseas and how that's been different, if once, I mean, whatever, for whatever circumstance, whether they're in service or not, that they end up experimenting with the plant overseas, like it's just different as well from here versus there.
Right, because set and setting are so important to how the drug affects you. I have one veteran and patient in particular that I don't think he would mind me discussing this. He's a Vietnam War vet and he has really severe PTSD, and he was just treating it by taking like 6 shots of vodka twice a day. That was the only way he could calm himself down and deal with the like intrusive flashbacks. And then we weaned him off the alcohol slowly and onto cannabis. And now he just takes like a puff or two, like twice a day. I have him vape dry flower. That's the safest thing. I don't love the vape sticks because I think they have chemicals in them. And I don't love, smoking. It's an important ritual to a lot of people, but ideally as a doctor, I have people who are going to inhale it, grind up the flower and use a vaporizer to heat it up, because that's technically the safest way. And as a doctor, I'm supposed to tell people the safest way, but I understand if people do other things for their own personal reasons. But he actually takes a puff or two from his vaporizer twice a day. And it's just been transformational. Like he goes out with his friends, he goes fishing again, he hangs out with the recreational center with all of his veteran buddies. And he used to just literally stay home and drink vodka by himself. His marriage is better. He's engaged. He's not dying of loneliness anymore. It's literally like, I can't even describe how much it's transformed the quality of his life, the transition from alcohol to cannabis. But the reality is we don't have very good medications for PTSD. We just don't. Some things we're really good at treating. If you have strep throat, we have 10 different antibiotics we can eradicate it with. But PTSD, we're not very good at treating. And if veterans say that it works for them, we don't have the best data because the research has been suppressed by the government for the last 80 years. But why would people say it works if it doesn't work? If anything, people say things don't work because they want opiates or whatever. Nobody says that a treatment works when it doesn't work. So, as my father, who was a cannabis specialist, used to say, in the absence of evidence, we have to do something very radical that doctors used to do. We have to listen to patients and believe them. I mean, wow.
Shocker.
Amazing.
Right.
But if veterans are demanding cannabis because it helps them with their PTSD, there's no reason in the world why we shouldn't be providing it for them, especially because it's safer than for example, the benzodiazepines, the Valium, the Klonopin that we're giving them, or the alcohol that they're using to self-medicate themselves with. My patient that I'm using as an example an actual example is a perfect manifestation or demonstration of this. So it just seems like a no-brainer, and it's just purely political that the VA is dragging their feet on this, and they need to stop immediately and apologize and allow the doctors to do their jobs and let them certify people for cannabis. And they need to not only not retaliate and punish veterans for using medical cannabis, but they need to do what they do in Canada. In Canada, they actually provide the veterans with cannabis because they understand that a lot of veterans are of limited means. They don't have a lot of money because they have a lot of emotional and physical baggage from having served the country. So we need to do a much better job. And our neighbor to the north is putting us to shame. So anyways, I just gave a TED talk and you asked a simple question, but those are my thoughts.
No, you're right and spot on. The VA should be providing it like other medications that they provide. And like you said, VA Canada, they're already, you reimbursed for 3 grams a day. So, I mean, that's an incredible. Granted, we have a larger population here, but also our veteran population shrinks by the day. So it would be great to see the VA as an institution and the federal government allow that. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, it will take some time in the policy land for us to be able to have it covered under insurance and have it be covered or reimbursed through the healthcare system. So,
but we're fortunate that we have a lot of veteran service organizations advocating for that down in DC with Congress. And I've spoken on behalf of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America 3 times with Congress. So there's progress being made, and the message is being sent. I feel like Congress is receiving that message. Now it's just time to implement it and send it down VA.
So if I hear this too, like quality of life is hugely important, and folks may say QOL or plant medicine, herbalism, natural medicine, integrative medicine, complementary therapy. Really, we're looking for pathways to feel and be well and live a very healthy, sustained life, not just with self, but within our, loved ones, our family, our communities, our experience here in this precious thing called life. And that leads me to having a conversation with you, Patricia, about your experience especially when soldiers were coming home from the Vietnam War, and worked closely on some of those initiatives when it came to, communicating, advocating, sharing about the different services that were available. And I'm curious about when you were, the 70s, what was happening then from your place of observation, some of the challenges that you observed that the veteran community faced then, and then what we can do better now with those who could benefit from access to complementary practices, wellness practices, and plant medicine access.
Well, one of the things that popped into my head as Dr. Greenspoon was speaking is that we didn't even really have a language for what was happening in the 70s. I mean, when I think back to just starting college, in the beginning of the 70s, and my first boyfriend coming back from Vietnam and being like cuckoo crazy, and I didn't understand what was going on. We didn't even have the word PTSD to describe what was going on with him, nor was there any, there were no services to address. These guys just came back. They were cool when they left, and they came back as different people. And so one of the things that popped into my head about, what we could even do now that I was not equipped to do at that point in time, particularly with Nixon kicking off the war on drugs, shortly thereafter, and that targeting certain elements of society, of which I was a part, not necessarily directly, but I could feel that because I lived in communities where lots of people were targeted. But the thought that popped into my head as Dr. Greenspoon was talking and also Stephen, was that maybe people like me who are not necessarily directly involved should be educated so that we can support and help veterans coming back more. Because if you don't have a direct relationship with someone, like, you believe the hype too, like you don't really understand what's going on. The conversation and the kind of education and enlightenment that we're receiving at this point in life, because it just wasn't really there for the guys who came back from Vietnam. I mean, people had been returned as heroes. I mean, even after the Iraq War, there was more of that, So, I have to say that, like a lot of people, as smart as I think I am or thought I was at that point in time, I really didn't understand what was going on. I was really just trying to live my life, and I was trying to duck bullets, in my everyday life. So, and as a part of doing that, wellness, staying well and protecting my sanity and protecting my own mind was always of utmost importance. So having people in my life, or insisting that I have communication with people like Dr. Greenspoon, where I could say to this person, no, like now I go into a doctor's office, they say, you look really good for your age. I don't know what that has to do with the fact that something may not be right, So I think, it's not about me, but I'm saying that we have to, as individuals, be educated, to be informed, to insist that doctors deal with us as individuals, to know to ask for what we need. I mean, just having conversations with people like Stephen and the doctor, and the relationship that I had in the 90s with the Vietnam veterans that we discussed before was eye-opening. And it did change my life about what could be expected, what had happened to a lot of people, and what I could do to help change that. And in my personal life, I believe that curiosity is what will open up a whole world, because that's even what brought me back to cannabis as an older woman, seeing the systemic cultural change, wondering how that could improve my life. How could that optimize the whole aging experience? If I was being gifted an additional 25 years, I want that to be as healthy as that could be. And so that should be the case for everyone.
Can you just share with our listeners and viewers a little bit about your experience with that project? And then in the
well, my actual experience with the Vietnam Veterans Health Project was that I was the communications person. I actually worked with the development director in creating the collateral material. And at the time, I still didn't know a great deal about them, but I knew about their initiatives, and I knew that the initiatives were all global. And they wound up winning the Nobel Peace Prize, as a matter of fact. Not that the whole organization got all of that money. I think that was a whole snafu with that. But the work that they did finally reached a level globally where there was some conversation,
And I just want to say, Patricia, use the word, not having the language, just to return back to our first question. Even us having, as a community and as post-Vietnam happening, the language around mental health and PTSD in general seemed to really come to the forefront after that era, and having veterans advocate and be like, we need to have support at a mental health level.
Yes.
Because that really wasn't the thing back then.
No, basically people came back and they were not social, but there was no real investigation into the reasons for that. There was no real query into trying to understand, well, maybe, let's say, I was going to say there was no real investigation into why this took place. Like, no one seemed to really want to know what happened in Vietnam.
Right.
No one really seemed to want to know what happened. It's just that you came back and you are not socialized. Now get with the program.
Right. It's back, in that era, it was more of, if you're strong, be quiet, like it was the whole man up kind of thing and just deal with it. And that never works out, still doesn't work out. But post 9/11 veterans owe so much to the Vietnam veterans and everything they went to and everything they fought for. Like you were saying, there was no PTSD until Vietnam veterans started speaking up and getting that research done. Even though they would just call it shell shock and stuff like that.
Forgotten that.
Yep, from back in World War II, World War I days. But PTSD was not new. War didn't bring PTSD on. It was just, what do we call it when it's somewhere else? Like, it needs to be named something else. But it was just mental health and transitioning issues and hypervigilance and so much more. Like you said, of you go from worrying about bullets buzzing by your head every day to now not getting spit on or something by someone, and it feels the same because you're still in that state. So yeah. But yeah, the Vietnam veterans, they had to go through just terrible treatment. I have a Vietnam veterans and had the story. He got back and while in the airport took his uniform off and put in the trash because he was just getting harassed so much. And to just think of that happening nowadays, again, we're fortunate that the Vietnam veterans took care of that. And now I don't think, back then too, they didn't really have a lot of support legislatively from Congress and everything. There was no one really standing up for veterans. Now we have that, and we're also taking advantage of that and holding those politicians to their word and making sure that they're there for all veterans. And that's why, access to any choice. And like you were saying, Dr. Grinspoon, we're not saying don't take benzodiazepines. Those work for some people, but if it's not working for someone, they should have that choice of something that does work for them. And that's really healing. Again, both of you mentioned it's individuals. So there's no across the board, this will work for that person. And, those 900 people just like them. So it's really treating the individual. And again, the late Dr. Lester Grinspoon saying that radical idea of listening to it and trusting your patient. Just ahead of his time.
Your dad was right, Peter. Your dad was right, Dr. Grinspoon. Man.
Well, the irony too is that doctors have been so slow to come around on medical cannabis. They've been way behind their patients. Like 94% of Americans support legal access to medical cannabis, and among doctors, it's taken much longer. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And we don't have to get into that. But the irony is that as a primary care doctor, it makes my life so much easier to be able to use medical cannabis. I have this great versatile tool to help people with like pain, insomnia, anxiety, and for some of these diseases that are impossible to treat, like fibromyalgia, nobody can treat, or PTSD or colitis, that kind of pain, or irritable bowel syndrome. Like, there are just some things that medicine is really bad at treating. There's some things we're amazing at treating, but other things we're not so good at treating. And having cannabis as a tool makes your life easier as a doctor, and the patients do well because, and some people theorize that the reason we're not good at treating these things is because they're mediated by the endocannabinoid system, the whole network of neurotransmitters, which is how cannabis works in our minds and bodies. And we just haven't studied it because it's like a casualty of the war on drugs. So, it's just really interesting. I think there's such exciting research going on now, and there will be even more exciting research when our government gets its act together and stops prohibiting the research. But I think doctors, once they start adapting it, are going to realize that their patients do really well, and it makes their lives a lot easier, because if someone isn't sleeping, you don't have to use the Ambien or the benzodiazepines or the, tricyclic, the amitriptyline, or the Elavil, or these things that just make people brain dead. They're just awful pills. They make you groggy in the morning. They could just take a small dose of cannabis and like happily drift off to sleep. And the side effects are terrible. You feel a little bit of happy euphoria and then you fall asleep. Like, how awful is that? I mean, it's like, I think that once doctors start realizing what patients know, that it's a very helpful medication, it's really going to continue to take off.
And the one factor that I think is important, and I never hear this, but I would curious, and I don't know how many cannabis patients you have, but myself and many other people being prescribed opioids for pain, it was always going back to my doctor trying to get more and increasing the dose because it wasn't working. I'm not and feeling at home like, oh, I'm going to take double. With cannabis is never that. I'm never like, man, I need to take so much more, and I need my doctor to give me more. That argument alone for physicians to be able to say, and having to report everything with opioid use, the fact that the patient isn't, drug seeking. That's what it was in my VA record, is I was a drug seeker when really I was a pain relief seeker. That alone should just speaks volumes to the benefits of cannabis and, as a tool for harm reduction.
Speaking of, go ahead, Dr. Grinspoon.
No, absolutely. And there's also like a patient empowerment piece to it too, because a lot of it's really trial and error, and the patient figures out their own dose, and it's not like micromanaged by the doctor. I think it's really empowering for patients.
That's why it's so important that people, that the conversations move into a broader spectrum, into communities where people are having the conversations, even if they are not in need of it right now, not open to it. The conversations should be had. I should not feel that I cannot ask my doctor for help or tell my doctor, even though this may not be her specialty rather, as my internist, that this is what I'm doing. I mean, can't she just look up drugs.com and find out if there's any interaction with that and perhaps my blood pressure medicine? I mean, I think that's her job.
Right.
And Patricia, I think we've talked about this too, just and for different communities to feel like they can have this conversation about wellness in general with their primary care, that they should have the choice and access to engage in different wellness practices. Yes, in plant medicine, but even like yoga and meditation, that they too feel like they have the choice to engage in these practices in addition to medication.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally feel that everything that you can put in your toolbox that supports, you feeling good about life should be put in your toolbox. So that if yoga, I mean, I practice yoga 3 times a week, mostly just for breathing, just for deep breathing. It's not for the asanas, just for realizing that I actually could breathe into my stomach and I could use that air in other places, good music, travel, retreats, intelligent people that stimulate you. All of these are part of following your own sort of curiosity about life, and even just the way the cannabis opens you up. I mean, for me, cannabis is a portal. It's part of my whole wellness. That's what I have in my suitcase. So I really am advocating for people to open themselves to these kind of conversations and to talk to anybody and everyone who will talk to them about them. I mean, there are people just like the 3 of you here. If you take that to the third power, there are people that you can talk to that will guide you, that will share information with you. So
I'm just also thinking, like, I come from first generation immigrant parents, and the concept of wellness and or engaging in conventional healthcare was like a big, like, we really didn't do that as a family. We used what was passed down through folk medicine and food and
Absolutely.
what was shared. So like I almost for, and I can relate to other minority groups who didn't have access or couldn't afford it, or thought that this sort of quality of life practices wasn't meant for them, and it actually really should be available for them.
Be available for everyone. I mean, I too come
Yes.
from a first generation family that migrated north, and we did not go to the doctor. When we went to the doctor, people were dying. Okay. It was like the end of the road. And so you were looking for some sort of ease into the next dimension. So, I mean, by and large, people grew, we ate what we grew. And there were concoctions and teas and herbs that for the most part, if you had deep colds or whatever, if you couldn't break it with certain concoctions, you just kind of lived through it, you know, because by and large, people were pretty healthy. To be really honest, people did not get that sick. But there was also an absence of knowledge about mental health. You know, there was an acceptance about people whose health was not necessarily in the middle of the bell curve.
Yep.
You know, like we accepted the fact that my first cousin was a little goofy. They would just say, his mind is bad. That would be the end of it. But you certainly didn't go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist for anything,
Right.
So
same thing in my family. Like, it took a while for my mother to get diagnosed, and it was a big taboo thing around mental health and wellness from the immigrant community. So
yeah. So there are a lot of things that are available that, just like veterans needed it, everyday citizens needed it. And I think that we have to open up about, the things that we suffer so that we know where to get help.
Yep. Hey, Anne, in keeping up with this, I don't want to interrupt the flow of our show here, so I just want to jump right into the next question here.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, Stephen.
We want to take a break?
We have a quick message, a PSA that we're going to invite our viewers to watch.
Okay, let's play it.
After this.
Hello, and thank you again for tuning into the Joint Venture & Co. show. We would like to remind everyone that they are not alone, and there are resources available for you or someone you know who is in crisis. Below are both the Veteran Crisis Hotline number and the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Jot them down, take a screenshot, and share it with your friends. It's confidential, available 24/7, and can connect you with people who care and want to help you get through these tough times. You matter, and please never give up.
Thank you again for joining us this evening. If you are just tuning in, we are sitting down with the one and only Patricia A. Patton and Dr. Peter Grinspoon as they share their insights and experiences of wellness and plant medicine within their communities, as well as serving veterans and their families. Before we hop back into our conversation, we'd like to briefly share a tip for celebrating and honoring veterans this upcoming Memorial Day weekend.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, Memorial Day often gets confused by society with Veterans Day. A Memorial Day is a day for all of us to come together and mourn the sacrifices and the loss of those that gave everything in their service to our country. Where Veterans Day is a day to, give, to thank a veteran. So, if you do come across a veteran and you want to, engage with them, you thank you. And if you wanted to ask anything about service, never ask, don't ask about war. Just ask them an easy question like, what was your favorite part of being in the military? Easy question like that, if you really would like to engage. But just let them know that you appreciate what they and their families sacrificed, and you are doing your part in remembering that in this day. So just a thing for veterans that we often, some may get frustrated with being thanked all day on Memorial Day when they're trying to mourn a loss and the passing of our brothers and sisters that are no longer with us, because we live for them. So everything we do is to honor their sacrifice and live and be happy and have their families be honored. So we're just trying to honor them for everything that we have and every opportunity that we have.
So hashtag more than thanks, and do something, be better yourself, help out where you can, to show up and support, yes, veterans, but also their families. It's truly an extension beyond the veteran and those who have lost a service member as well.
Right.
So, and we asked you all, please make sure you share this with a family, a friend, or colleague, anyone within your network that may be within the military community, and so that they can learn more about cannabis wellness and other various options that we'll be exploring each episode here on Pro Cannabis Media, the first Wednesday of each month.
Yep.
All right, Stephen, let's take it away with getting back into it. Dr. Grinspoon and Patricia.
Absolutely. So there's states with medical program that you have a qualifying condition as a requirement to become a patient. States like Illinois keep a database of information, which includes certifications issued by type of debilitating conditions. Top 5 conditions reported there are cancer, migraines. Number 3 is osteoarthritis. Number 2, PTSD. And number 1, chronic pain, with over 14,000 patients being registered for that. Unfortunately, in Massachusetts, the Cannabis Control Commission is not collecting these statistics like this to date. Hopefully that's some initiative they plan on doing in the future. But Dr. Grinspoon, as a certifying physician, you see patients with a huge array of injuries, ailments, conditions. But what are you seeing as the top conditions being treated with cannabis successfully in Massachusetts? Also, on average, how many patients return to you with less than desired results that they were expecting when they use cannabis? So those that come back and say, yeah, it really didn't help me.
Well, first of all, it's really interesting. Cannabis does several things at once. And, a lot of the traditional studies look at one thing. Does it help your pain? Does it help your cholesterol? But cannabis acts on so many different systems in the body. It can help you at the same time sleep better, relax, feel happier, feel less pain, feel less anxiety about the pain, have the pain bother you less, and worry less. So, it's interesting when you list off those conditions. Oftentimes when I'm writing down a condition for a patient, I'm treating them and it's helping them be less anxious about having pain. And then because they're less anxious and they have less pain, they're sleeping better. And then because they're sleeping better, they're happier. So
Yep.
Do I write chronic pain? Do I write anxiety? Do I write depression, or do I write insomnia? So it's a little bit of an artificial thing, like which really strict, narrow diagnostic label we put on what we're treating many patients with cannabis, when the fact is we're often treating several different things at once. So I sort of laughed when they said osteoarthritis. Like, osteoarthritis is pain. And
Right.
what's the difference between osteoarthritis and chronic pain? You're not really treating the bone. You treat the bone with like vitamin D and calcium. So it generally speaking, I treat a lot of chronic pain and a lot of insomnia and anxiety. I would say those are the 3 biggest things. But again, it's not always easy to pigeonhole exactly one specific thing that you're treating, because these things are really related together. Pain and inflammation are two sides of the same coin, and cannabis is an anti-inflammatory. And, there's such a psychological component to pain, which isn't at all to belittle it or dismiss it, is saying it's all in your head, but it really is. People get anxious about having pain.
Yep.
And, and just like insomnia, anybody who's had insomnia gets anxious about not being able to sleep, and then they can't sleep, and it becomes that happens to everybody who's had insomnia. So the fact is that cannabis works on so many different systems at once that you really are treating more than one thing at once. So I think it sort of defies the kind of like really monolithic characterization. I often, really do start low and go slow. And often if I can get away with it, I try to even start with CBD, because, try to avoid the complexity of this kind of the intoxication and I don't want to say the psychoactivity, but avoid it. So why not try with CBD? If CBD can help people with chronic pain, anxiety, insomnia right there. And sometimes it helps people. Part of the problem is that CBD is really expensive, and the doses that we use tend to be very low. A lot of the animal studies, all the research is catching up, because CBD was caught up in the war on drugs. And even though you can't have fun with it, so therefore there's no reason for the government to be against it, the research has still sort of been prohibited. So we need to catch up with the research. But a lot of the animal studies were like 20 to 30 milligrams per kilogram, meaning that for a 70 kilogram person, the dose would be like 1,000, 1,500 milligrams. And the little gummy bear you get at Walgreens is 30 milligrams, not 1,000. So I think people are taking these really minuscule doses of CBD and it's not working. And they're saying, CBD doesn't work for me. But the doses that people are taking are really low. But if it's like $1 a milligram, if it's $1 for 30 milligrams, who's going to spend like $20 to take a 600 milligram dose? That's not practical if insurance doesn't pay for it. So I do have people come back and say, the only thing CBD did is waste my money. And I just don't know if it's because I'm like underdosing them or it's because CBD isn't strong enough. But it's easy enough to add in a little bit of THC. Now, some people can't take cannabis because it makes them anxious, even if you use a lot of CBD or if you use very low doses. So some people just can't take it. Some people, and for some people, it doesn't work. For pain patients, some people say it makes me more aware of my pain, not less aware. They think about it more. I mean, cannabis can blunt pain, and it also tends to turn off the part of your brain that makes pain a noxious sensation. So you have the pain, but you're like, whatever, I feel better and the pain isn't hurting me. But for some people, it makes them focus more on the pain. So it actually can make a small subset of patients their pain worse or subjectively worse. So it definitely doesn't work for everybody. It can make some people more anxious. It can make and for some people, it can keep them awake because it's so stimulating. I mean, you try to use a sedating strain, you try to add CBD in and so forth. But for some people, in the way that it can stimulate intellectual thought and ideas and creativity, and appreciation of the things you're doing, and it makes you connect more with art and music. All these things can be stimulating, and that isn't necessarily good for sleep if you're trying to wind down and relax. So, I would say definitely it doesn't always work for the things I'm trying to use it for. So I would say it works. It often works well for many of the things I use it for, but nothing that I do as a primary care doctor works all the time. Right. And that's the thing. You just try something, and then if it doesn't work, you try something else. And that's why you need to have as many options as possible, and why it's absolutely insane not to have cannabis, which is less toxic than many, if not most, if not all the alternatives we use for chronic pain and for insomnia, as a ready, safe, and legal alternative to use to try with people. So it's all about having options.
Yeah,
I find that to be the most difficult conversation to have with people who are more curious. They want to know, actually, why can't you just tell me what to take? Just tell me what to take. I don't want to know this or that. Just tell me what to take. And you just describe, the various possibilities, how different it is from one person to the next, so it's fascinating.
I just had so many memes go through my head with like trying to sleep and like a cat with like laser beams and
Right.
like playing like guitar and like eating pizza, like the weirdest. You're just trying to rest. But I also think when you're as an individual and you're experimenting, I think we as a culture, we're returning back to this sense of self and being conscious about those subtle but significant improvements that only us individually would be able to identify. And it does take these incremental, it's not like 2 weeks, but it can take time of very low consistent dosing that can really offer relief. And like tuning in to self is what's going to lend itself to recognizing that and when someone's, at that point, like, just tell me what, where, and when, and give me a script, then like we need to like even go deeper background zero of coming from a place of conscious consumption and identifying the relief that you're looking to achieve with this practice.
Right. Well, doctors aren't comfortable with that either. They're used to saying, take 10 milligrams of this pill once a day. They're not used to saying, buy a tincture, take 1 drop, take 2 drops the next night, work your way up slowly. Doctors aren't comfortable with that either, just like patients aren't. It takes some adjustment.
So true.
Yeah, I mean, it's systemic. I mean, that's since, everything we take is dosed out, and the DEA, FDA, all approving that. And that we've, as consumers, that's what we are programmed to have.
But I think that for me, the major difference in terms of my approach and my belief is that, we are responsible for our own health. Like, we really are responsible for our own health. And that, I just experienced a very serious health challenge that nobody could find, but I knew something was going on, and I had to push for them to pinpoint what that was and to help me solve that problem. So it's like, yes, my doctor was brilliant, et cetera, but in this age when doctors no longer even examine you, they just ask you questions, insert the information into an electronic medical file, and then make decisions based upon the information. So, you have to take responsibility for your health. You have to have conversations with people like Dr. Greenspoon, other health or healers. All of these people are part of my arsenal when it comes to how can I heal myself? How can I age and optimize healthy aging in that process?
By the way, we have a nice comment in the YouTube. It says, medicating is an art as much as it is a science.
Yeah.
True.
Right. And like our own individual wild, Amazon jungle internally, mind, body, and soul is very much a very unique environment. Dr. Grinspoon, were you going to say something?
No, I completely agree. I mean, it depends a little on the context. Like if I had some complex cancer, I'd definitely surrender all control to the oncologist.
Yes, I agree with you.
But in general, I completely agree that you have to take responsibility and control yourself. A lot of the agency is being taken away from the doctors. I just see what's happening in my career over the last 10 years. I have so much less control over what I can provide for my patients. The insurance company tries to make me beg for tests that they know my patients need, that I know my patients need.
Yes.
Hospitals are all commodifying the doctors. They're like nickel and diming us and like squeezing us to see more and more patients in less and less time. It's almost impossible to do a good job with anybody. And the computerized medical records, we literally spend 3/4 of our time like typing in entry into the computer. None of the doctors want to do that. Like none of us, we would have become computer programmers. We wanted to
Right.
type into the computer. So it's like becoming like virtually impossible to be a humane and effective doctor these days. So I couldn't agree with you more. You have to take responsibility for your own health, because even if you find a doctor that cares and isn't burnt out and wants to help you, it's almost impossible these days for him or her to actually help you. So now more than ever, you have to take responsibility for your own healthcare. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a pessimist. I'm
No, I hear
optimistic
you.
person, but it's very difficult these days.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear.
Well, I want to leave, let's leave this last question as to both you all. And I'd love to ask Patricia to answer first, and then Dr. Grinspoon. What can we do better to enrich and empower health inequalities in communities, especially those who believe wellness is not within their reach?
Well, I think that the people with superior knowledge have to find ways to communicate with wider constituencies. I mean, one of the things that I've been advocating for were brands to, if they don't want to go into communities, if they don't want to talk to leaders in communities, people who are trusted sources of information, just as COVID showed that you needed emissaries, people who were trusted to take information into communities. The same thing I think has to be true for other things. You just can't use a shotgun blast to send information, because what happens is it just filters to people who are not so busy with their lives that they can pay attention. And a lot of the people who really need the information are functioning at another level. But there are different levels that you can use to get that information to them. And so I think that brands and businesses and people who care need to put a little more time into building better bridges.
Mm.
I would completely agree. I think about this a lot, both because I work in an inner city clinic as a primary care doctor, and we got flattened during the COVID epidemic. We had the highest rate in the country for a couple of weeks in Chelsea.
So scary.
Yeah, it was awful. And then also, in the whole cannabis issue in Massachusetts, we had a hero in charge, Commissioner Title, and we still didn't make nearly as much progress as we should have in terms of equity, because the corporations are just so powerful and they just like bulldoze everything. I think a lot of it has to come from the grassroots. And I agree, a lot of it has to do with like control of information.
Yes.
And it's just very difficult with like the corporate sort of consolidation of information. And, it's really interesting what's happening with the cannabis industry. There's like the corporate part, and then there's like all the people from the movement coming up. And, it just, and then you have like tobacco coming in, and there just has to be a way to like keep the idealism of the movement alive, because the idealists are interested in equity. The hardcore business people aren't.
No.
So there just has to be a way to like keep the heart and soul of the movement alive and translate that into values. I've been to industry conferences where it's like every single person's like a white male, and most of them are from like the tobacco and alcohol industry, and they occasionally use the word wellness to like just cover themselves, but you can tell nobody cares. And then I've been to other events where people genuinely care, and it's much more diverse. And I think we're sort of at a crossroads, and the question you ask is like a critical question. And I don't think anybody really has the answer to it, or we wouldn't be like all scratching our heads and watching equity endeavor after equity endeavor come up short. So I don't pretend to have the answers, but I just think it's critical. And I think part of it has to do with like finding the identity of the industry, not just becoming like another like corporate boondoggle, but really trying to like hold on to our roots, is like really fighting for social justice and fighting to help people. It's not just about making money. I mean, if it's just about making money, what's the point? So
Exactly.
Couldn't agree with you guys more.
Yeah, exactly. That's
we're-
right.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
running up against the end of the show here. But this has been such an amazing and enlightening conversation with you both. It's been a pleasure having this hour to talk with you and discuss health, wellness, and helping veterans. So thank you so much for being here and doing this with us.
Yeah, we appreciate you both so much. It's been amazing to work with you both individually in doing some meaningful work in the space in our own little ways as much as we can. From the first time I really got to spend time with you, Dr. Grinspoon, and your family with Peter on our project, and getting to meet your mom and your father and coming up with a script and just that whole experience, to then my meeting Patricia for the first time in Boston for the a High Curious event, and like it's led to this and what we've been able to do in our own little ways. This is part of the grassroots movement, taking the time, sharing your heart and your soul and your experience and being vulnerable with everyone. This is being the change, as Stephen likes to say. So and so I would like to just if y'all want to just let the viewers and listeners know where they can find out more about you or where you'd like them to know. Ladies first.
Well, easiest place to find me, if you can remember my name, is patriciaapatton.com, or you can look for Cannaboomers on Instagram. The Cannabis Business Alliance is in process. It is officially a B Corp, Delaware B Corp, but our website is in process at this moment. So look for me and Mary Jane on a podcast platform of your choice. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Dr. Grinspoon?
First of all, I just want to say, Patricia, it was an honor to meet you and to be on the show.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Like, you're so cool.
He is super cool.
Yeah. To be the first of many. And I'm just at petergrinspoon.com. It's easy to reach me. Peter, grin like smile, spoon like fork, petergrinspoon.com. People can send me messages or whatever. So,
Dr. Grinspoon, you're very active on LinkedIn, as well as Patricia, for those who want to connect with y'all on there as well. And again, like Stephen, if you can hold up Dr. Grinspoon's book, and if anyone wants to go ahead and learn more about him, sharing his heart and soul in that book.
How to screw up your life and put it back together again.
And put it back together again, right?
It.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and to find out more work about Stephen and I and what we're doing here in the New England region, you're more than welcome to visit us at jointvco.com or on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook at jointvco, and our respective names on LinkedIn. And if you're a company, organization, or social initiative in need of branding and marketing with shared values and mission of our show today, cannabis, wellness, and veterans, visit us again at jointvco.com.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, grateful for our guests tonight and for everyone tuning in to hear this and get all this information. Truly an honor. So thank you both very much.
Yep, we'll see.
And thank you, Ann.
Bye.
Thank you, Mandile. We'll see you all again on the next show, first Wednesday here on Pro Cannabis Media. Adios.
Good night.
Have a good night.